thank you all for coming. What a great crowd. Can you all hear me okay? Let me know if you need me to turn up the volume or turn down the volume. I can speak loudly. So I'm very excited to share artifacts from the State Museum's collection with you tonight. And since we were doing this for Women's History Month, I did a little bit of research about the history of this month. And was reminded that it was established fairly recently, at least in my mind, 1987, which, you know, it's during my adult lifetime, so it's not very long ago. There was an International Women's History Day in 1911, but it was very briefly celebrated and then forgotten about until the 1970s, when they established Women's History Weeks for a couple years. And then in 1987, the United States Congress passed legislation to designate the month of March as Women's History Month. So the goal of this month every year is to highlight the contributions of women. Okay, so back to the silhouette drawing, ink drawing at the bottom. As I said, done by probably a late teenage girl. And I just think it has a real sort of female sensibility of family life, with the little boy pulling on his sister's braid, and I just think that's really sweet. The quilt seen here, well, you know, it's a bigger quilt, but that's just part of it. That's a really interesting artifact because it's the second of two donations we got from one family. The first donation was a beautiful bodice and skirt, handmade from the late 1800s, and then the donor ran across this quilt in the family's collection and realized that this quilt was made from pieces of fabric from that dress as well as others. So she thought we needed to have it, and I totally agree. I think it's really cool. The ERA bracelet there represents when the Equal Rights Amendment was passed in Wyoming. We were one of the first states to ratify it in 1973. And I threw in the awesome white patent leather go-go boots because I just love them. All right, now we can move on. I'll try to do this. Nope, I went the wrong one. I'll let you do it. Okay, so, oh, that's too fast, but that's okay. So despite the fact that much of the history you probably know about Wyoming history relates to men, you know, the early explorers, the mountain men, the miners, the soldiers, the cowboys, you probably also know that Wyoming is known as the equality state. Yay. So I'm going to start with women's suffrage. So Wyoming is known for many nationwide firsts for women, including being the very first to grant women the right, the first state to permanently give women the right to vote in 1869, which was 51 years before the 19th Amendment, when all American women got the right to vote. So it's pretty awesome. We were ahead of the game there. So the two artifacts you see here, this Frank Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper was a nationwide publication. This image was not actually, this issue is actually from 1888, but it does depict the first time that women voted in a territorial election in Wyoming on September 6th, 1877. And, excuse me, I have a hair in my mouth. The painting you see on the right is also in our collection. It was done by an amateur artist who did the same image and adapted it. So, all right, next slide. Okay. The flag seen here is actually a really amazing artifact, in my opinion. And we have only recently connected the dots about the provenance of this artifact. It was presented to Miss Susan B. Anthony at the first Equal Suffrage Convention after Wyoming was admitted as a state in 1890. You will see 11 gold stars on the field of blue. The largest star represents the state of Wyoming because we were the first to grant women suffrage, which basically just means the legal right for women to vote in public elections. The other stars were added to the flag in order of enacting equal suffrage: Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Washington, California, Kansas, Oregon, Arizona, Nevada, and Montana. So I imagine you all are familiar with Susan B. Anthony, but if not, she was a national leader in women's rights and served as the president of the National Women's Suffrage Association from 1892 to 1900. So this flag represents a direct connection from the people of Wyoming, the women of Wyoming, to this national suffrage leader, Susan B. Anthony. I also while I was researching this, I ran across a reference to Susan B. Anthony actually having relatives in Wyoming. I need to dig into that more to see if that's really true or not. And then this is just a postcard from our collection. It was a commercially produced postcard that, documents Wyoming is the first to grant suffrage. So, all right, next slide, please. Esther Hobart Morris. I don't think we can talk about women's history without mentioning Esther. She's a very well-known figure in Wyoming's suffrage story. Her importance to women achieving the right to vote has been somewhat debated over the years, and I'm not going to get into all those details, but she has been given a lot of credit for Wyoming's equality in Wyoming, women's equality in Wyoming. And she did actually achieve a first for women when she was appointed as the first female justice of the peace in the United States in February 1870 in South Pass City. Interestingly, I found this little tidbit when I was researching this, that one reason she got that job was because the previous justice resigned in protest over the Wyoming Territory passing the suffrage amendment. So, interesting. So she only held that position for 18 months, but she tried 70 cases. None of them were overturned. And unfortunately, she wasn't reappointed, but she apparently did quite well in that position while she had it. The sculpture you see here is the one that's over in the State Capitol building. Hopefully you've all seen it before. Its twin was created in 1960 by Avard Fairbanks. This sculpture is one of two that represents the state of Wyoming in Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol building. The other sculpture is Chief Washakie. So Wyoming is represented by Esther Hobart Morris and Chief Washakie, which is pretty amazing. But this duplicate sculpture was made after the first one, and it's part of our collection. And it stood in front of the Capitol for many, many years. You probably remember it being there. It recently underwent some wonderful conservation work. So I encourage you to go see it in its new location. It's in the walkway between the Capitol and the Herscher building. And she really looks great. And she's also there with Chief Washakie. So go check it out. No, I don't think so. But the sculpture was completely repatinated because it was run into by a car in the 1960s. And just had suffered a lot of damage from being outside. This picture was actually done before the conservation. You can see there's like a big black mark on her and some wear. So she looks really spectacular now. So go check her out. The shawl, that's the front and back of a shawl on the bottom right there, that actually belonged to Esther Hobart Morris. It's in our collection. It was donated in 1985 by Bill Dubois. Some of you may know him. He was the great-great-grandson of Esther Hobart Morris. And so that came into our collection, which was pretty amazing. Okay, next. Okay, this flag you may have seen, it's been on exhibit in the museum many times. It's very large. It's about 6.5 feet tall by 7 feet wide. It is one of the first Wyoming flags with 44 stars to represent the newest state of Wyoming. And as you can see, it's embroidered, hand embroidered to Wyoming from her women in honor of the state constitution 1890. And our friend Esther Hobart Morris from the previous slide personally presented this flag to Governor F.E. Warren on Statehood Day, July 10th, 1890, to show appreciation for the continued right of suffrage in the state. And I found this wonderful quote from a newspaper of the day that said, "Gathering the folds of this beautiful flag around her, Esther Hobart Morris said, on behalf of the women of Wyoming, and in grateful recognition of the high privilege of citizenship that has been conferred upon us, I have the honor to present the state of Wyoming this beautiful flag. May it always remain the emblem of our liberties and the flag of the Union forever." And this is a photograph of Esther here on the right. She has very piercing eyes. But a really one of the most valuable artifacts in our collection, I think, just historically. So, all right, next. Quick drink of water. Okay, while we are on the subject of Statehood Day, I also wanted to briefly mention the Girl Guards and their contribution to women's history. So this group of young ladies, mostly teenagers, I think, they're in front of the state capitol steps, you can see. There were two groups that formed ceremonial drill companies K and H. They actually trained with the Army at Fort Russell and played an active role in the Statehood Day celebrations. They used wooden rifles. They weren't trusted with real ones, I guess. And they practiced drill patterns out of a manual from the Knights of Pythias of the day. There were girl captains here on the ends. They actually did trust them with real swords. So, but we have two of these kepi caps and two of the wooden rifles that they used in their drills. We also have several of these original, like, souvenir Statehood Day celebration ribbons in our collection. So, all right, next. Another famous Wyoming first, as you probably already know, was the election of the first female governor in the United States, Nellie Taylor Ross. As you know, probably know, her husband died in office, and she ran for, well, she didn't run too much for election, but she was elected to take his place. And she won the election, served from 1925 to 1927. She was actually inaugurated 100 years ago this year. She was inaugurated on January 5th, 1925. And she was, one other woman in the United States was elected on the same day, Ma Ferguson, love her name. But Nellie took office 12 days before Ma Ferguson did. So that is why Governor Nellie Taylor Ross was the first female governor in the United States. Unfortunately, she only served those 2 years, lost her bid for re-election. But then, actually, I just read this today, after her defeat, she joined the Chautauqua Circuit and went all around the country talking about her time as governor. And then from 1933 to 1953, she served as the first female director of the United States Mint. And at the time, that was the highest ranking female civil servant of her time. And I also want to mention she was a mother of 4 children as well. So she was a very busy woman, had a very busy life. This is her official gubernatorial portrait. We have one in the collection for each of the governors. Hers is currently hanging in Governor Borden's office. So that's pretty awesome because his official portrait won't happen until after he leaves office. So if you want to see it, you can see it in the state capitol right now. All right, next. Just a couple more quick artifacts relating to Nellie Taylor Ross. This was an award that was presented to Governor Ross just a month after she took office. It was presented by Collier's Magazine, and it showed because Wyoming showed the largest per capita increase in voter turnout nationwide for the presidential election of 1924. Now, I wonder, was that because there was Nellie Taylor Ross on the ballot in Wyoming and more people showed up? I don't know. That's purely conjecture. I like to think that. But also, this is one of our First Lady's dolls. Obviously, Nellie was a First Lady before she was governor. We have a whole collection of First Lady dolls. Each one is shown in their inauguration gown. And I kind of hope one day we'll have another female governor, so we'll have a first gentleman doll, but we'll see if that ever happens. All right, next, please. One more famous Wyoming woman, Verna Keyes. You may have heard her story at a previous archives lecture a few months ago, but I want to include her. Just a reminder that Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, but surprisingly, we had no official flag until 1917. Almost 30 years later, we had no state flag. I don't know if that's common of other states, but that's the way it was in Wyoming. So it was a women's group, the Daughters of the American Revolution, who recognized this oversight. They held a contest for some, people to enter with flag designs, and then for the legislature to approve it. The winner was Miss Verna Keyes. Her maiden name was Keays. Her married name was also Keyes, Keys. So interestingly. But when she won this contest, she was 23 years old. She had grown up in Buffalo, Wyoming. She was also Wyoming's first graduate of the Chicago Art Institute. And she did this design. She wrote this description of the symbolism of all colors, and she was paid the grand prize of $20 for her entry. But that was donated to the State Museum in 1919, so not long after it was created. And then down on the right, you'll see an actual Wyoming state flag. It's silk with a hand-painted buffalo design on it. We believe this is one of the original hand-painted flags that was presented to the state historian by Verna Keyes. So also another pretty cool artifact. All right, next. Now, so I'm done with famous women, I think, for now. So I'm going to move on to some women that maybe you guys have not heard of before. Starting with Dr. Lillian Heath Nelson. She was the first licensed female physician in the state of Wyoming. She lived from 1865 to 1962, and she apparently loved medicine from a very early age. When she was only 16 years old, she helped with the autopsy for Big Nose George Parrott after he was hanged in Rawlins. I don't know, they were family friends of the doctor, I guess. And so she got to help with the autopsy. And she was actually given Big Nose George's skull cap as a souvenir. And she kept it for the rest of her life, used it as a desk decoration and a doorstop once she became a doctor. I think it's in the Rawlins Museum now, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm actually going there next week. Is it? Okay. Yeah, so I've never seen it in person, so I'm going to check that out. But anyway, Lillian studied medicine at the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Iowa. She was one of 3 women who started in her class. I'm not sure they all graduated, but Lillian did in 1893. And once she had her degree, she returned to her parents' home in Rawlins, set up her medical practice where she did everything from deliver babies to treat gunshot wounds, and she even helped perform plastic surgery from time to time when it wasn't even recognized as a specialty. She was known to make house calls, but usually dressed as a man if she had to go out at night, and carried a .32 caliber revolver for personal protection. But as you can see here, this hat also belonged to Dr. Nelson. It is right here. You want to look at it more closely later. And this is a photograph of her. So as you can see, she didn't always dress as a man. She liked fabulous hats, I think. We also have 2 medical kits that she owned. One you can see here. We also have a second one that has a syringe and a vial for morphine. So she was a busy doctor. And then the plaque on the right was presented to Dr. Heath by the Wyoming Medical Society in 1956 to recognize her many professional accomplishments. So she actively practiced medicine for 15 years, but kept her license up to date her entire life. She lived to be 97 years old and died of a hip fracture. Pretty amazing life. Next. Okay, I'm going to talk about teachers now. Teaching has been a very important profession filled by women for many, many years. Mothers are a child's first teacher after all, I think. And I know I have too many artifacts on this slide, but I couldn't help myself, so I will walk you through them. So this is a mobile teacher's desk here. It's about PA big, just a box, cubby holes. The front is hinged and drops down. It belonged to Miss Alice Hebard, who came to Cheyenne in 1882 and was Cheyenne's very first kindergarten teacher. She ended up teaching kindergarten through 4th grade at Johnson School when it opened in 1884. And she retired in 1918, so she worked a good long time. And then she moved to Laramie to live with her sister. So this is Alice. This is Alice's sister, Grace, Dr. Grace Raymond Hebard, that you probably know as well. Grace was also a teacher, UW professor, historian, librarian. But there's a great note in our file about Alice Hebard. It says that she was remembered very kindly by parents. Miss Hebard made sure that Santa always came to the school and left small presents for each child. The children also had a special dinner at Alice's home and received a present for their birthday. If the child had younger siblings, they also often received a little gift as well. So I just thought that was a lovely ode to a teacher in Cheyenne. This is a photograph up here. For the Wyoming State Centennial in 1990, they had a photographer's project. They were trying to capture a day in the life of Wyoming. One day, everybody went out and took pictures. And so this is one of those pictures. We have a whole series of them. And this captured a teacher at work, science teacher in Hot Springs County. And I just love that she's surrounded by notebooks of homework, and just shows all the extra work a teacher has to do in addition to teaching a class. Then she has to do all the grading of everything. So I thought that was a nice representation. In the middle, we have a ribbon and a button from the Teachers Association conferences, so kind of represents professional lives and associations of teachers. A couple months ago, you may have all heard a talk about Estelle Real. We had some ribbons and buttons on display for that. We have several artifacts relating to her. Estelle Real was the first woman in Wyoming to be elected to a statewide office in 1895. So that's 30 years before Governor Ross was elected. Estelle Real was elected Superintendent of Public Instruction. She was soon thereafter appointed as the National Superintendent of Indian Schools by President McKinley, and became the first woman nationwide to hold a federal appointment requiring Senate ratification. That was kind of a big deal too. And then the chalkboard you see up on the upper right, quite large. It's about 7 feet tall and 8 feet wide on casters. You can roll it around. It is from St. Mary's Catholic School that was located just east of the state capitol building. You all may remember that. And Dominican sisters were the only teachers at the school from the 1930s through the 1970s. So it would have been used by those Dominican sisters. This chalkboard, I don't know when it dates to, 1930s maybe. But the lesson that is still on it probably is from the early 2000s when the school was demolished. It's a two-sided chalkboard. On the other side, children have drawn pictures of SpongeBob SquarePants. So, we haven't erased those because that's part of the artifact's history. So, kind of cool. Okay, next. I just wanted to touch a little bit on non-traditional features in Wyoming. So this is a fur cape. I don't know if you can see the detail on it very well. Beautiful, warm garment. It was owned by another kind of teacher, one who utilized the new television medium in the 1960s for children's television programming. Her name was Dimpna Halpin-Sackett, and she was a World War II war bride who came from Ireland. And she created the Timmy O'Toole Children's Show on KGWN in Cheyenne in 1964. Does anybody remember this show? Yeah? I am trying to find like a picture of Dimna. If anybody has a lead on that for me, let me know. Haven't been able to find one so far. But a lot of these sorts of TV shows showed up at the time nationwide, Romper Room, and then, of course, leading to Sesame Street in the late 60s. And fun fact for you all, I would be remiss to not mention this. My husband, who is in the back row over there, was a guest on this show when he was 5 years old. And he won the quiz competition and won a suit of clothes. Now, we don't have that suit of clothes, unfortunately. I wish I had it for the collection, but it's just long gone, but kind of a neat detail. And then the piano on the right, you might look at it and say, that's just a piano. What does that have to do with anything? We actually know it was made in 1850, very old piano, was brought to Laramie, Wyoming in 1868. And it was used by Mrs. J.E. McClure to teach piano lessons for many years in Laramie. So this is a great example of how we in the museum profession think about artifacts. Yes, indeed, this is a great, historic, beautiful piano. But when I look at it, I also see the woman who taught all these little children how to play piano and learn music on it. So the history of the use of this object is just as important to us as it being an antique piano. So that is why we interview our donors when they bring us artifacts. We try and find out these histories and record them in our records. So, all right, next slide, please. Secretarial and office work. Okay, you might say, oh, that's boring, but I think it's very interesting. So many women have worked as secretaries over the years. Anybody done that here? I started as a secretary. Many of my first jobs were secretaries. Started in high school. I learned how to use all these kinds of old-timey office machines. The typewriter here, I picked this one because I just love it. I love the color of it. I love the style of it. I think antique typewriters are awesome, but I'm kind of weird. But the history we know about it is that it was owned and used by a young woman in high school, college, and beyond. I think she got it as a 9th grade graduation present. She used it from 1957 until 1980, and eventually earned an MBA in accounting. And her dad owned an office supply company here in Cheyenne, and she picked up this typewriter because it had customized script type, and she never changed it. So it like writes in cursive, which is unusual. And when she donated it, the lady said, I stopped using this typewriter in 1980 when I purchased an IBM Selectric electric typewriter. That electric typewriter was a luxury. And if you know, you know. They're amazing. I still love them more than my computer. So you can also see a shorthand book there, which was donated by a person who's in our audience tonight, Anne Esquivel Redman. When she attended St. Mary's School in Cheyenne, back to St. Mary's again, she told me that she took shorthand, typing, and bookkeeping for several years from Sister Christine. And then Anne went on to work in many office jobs, helped spearhead Wyoming Centennial Commission, and won the 2017 Woman of Influence Lifetime Achievement Award. So that little book tells us a lot about the start of someone who has gone on to have an amazing life. And she told me that she still uses shorthand today. I didn't learn way back then. So I think that's pretty neat. The dictation machine up on the top right. I don't know if any of you ever used one of those. Yeah. So the boss would, record letters and memos and whatnot on tape, give it to the secretary to play back with foot pedal so it could be typed up on paper. And then the stenography machine in the center was used by a court reporter at the Wyoming Supreme Court, probably in the 1970s, based on the beautiful avocado green color. I don't know a lot about it. I actually found this at the state surplus. Sometimes we go over to state surplus and roam around trying to find cool things. And I was like, oh, we need that for the collection to help us talk about the history of court reporting, because we didn't have one before. So, all right, how am I doing on time? Probably better pick it up. Okay, nursing, kind of a traditional female pursuit. The lady here in the center, I just love her. She worked at the Poor or Pest House in Cheyenne. Have any of you ever heard of that? Was located in South. Pardon me?
Across from Terrell Chevrolet.
Okay, yeah.
Poor Farm Road.
Yes.
It's not politically correct anymore.
No, it's not. It's where homeless or sick people in the early days, early 1900s, lived in Cheyenne. I found some interesting newspaper references from 1911 that reported, in the newspaper, reported 3 patients with smallpox had escaped from the pest house. Help us find them. Can you imagine? Smallpox. But anyway, we got a donation of several things, including a cot and miscellaneous things. And this photograph of this nurse that was left in the facility up until the day it was demolished, and somebody salvaged it. And I just love her look. I wish I knew more about what her life was like and what she saw in her work, because I'm sure it was pretty amazing. Nurse's cap, Susie donated this to us a few years ago. Just kind of a mid-century style of nurse's cap. And then the nurse's aide uniform pattern on the right, when these women had to make their own uniforms to go to work as nurses' aides. So, all right. Next. We also have some wonderful artifacts relating to military nurses and Red Cross nurses. These 3 items are all from World War I. They belonged to Vera Jane Pease. She served in the Red Cross in France. This is actually a flag. It's much bigger. You can't tell from the picture there, but it hung on the Red Cross hut in France during World War I. Amazing. And then her apron and a little water basin. And I've probably seen too many movies, but I look at that and I see it filled with water and a nurse, dipping a handkerchief in it to soothe a wounded soldier. So anyway, pretty cool, I think. These 2 posters are from World War II, just fundraising for Red Cross, recruiting for women in as a nurse or other military positions. Okay, now we're going to switch gears a bit and talk about women's civic clubs. Clubs like this have been very important for civic projects in Wyoming's communities for many, many years. And I think the state archives, you guys have a lot of records relating to different women's civic clubs. So that's good. This is a quilt. Might not be able to tell too easily from that, but during the early years of the Great Depression in the 1930s, Townsend clubs popped up nationwide to support a $200 monthly pension for every person over the age of 60. So this was prior to the Social Security Act, and these Townsend clubs helped, bring attention to the need to provide an income for older people. So this particular quilt was created in 1940 in Riverton as part of a club project. It was donated to us in 1942. So whoever won it must have, bought it as fundraising, donated it to us soon after. The banner you see there says the Women's Club of Cheyenne, 1888, started as a literary club here in Cheyenne, and then eventually became affiliated with the General Federation of Women's Clubs that was founded nationally in 1890. There are currently about 2,300 GFWC clubs still in the United States. There are 11 of them in Wyoming still. And so there's some ribbons on the right from the Federation of Women's Clubs as well. 2 more women's clubs I want to talk about. The Searchlight Club. So the club in Cheyenne was established on December 4th, 1904. As a literary and service-based group, and was the first women's club in Cheyenne specifically for African-American women. And this is one of the earliest photos of that club. They also raised money for scholarships for young Black women. The teacups and saucers that you see there were just donated to us last year from a woman who was a member of the Searchlight Club, along with her mother and her grandmother. And so she said they would have, social gatherings as part of their club meetings, and they would have tea and cookies and whatnot. So those were used by Searchlight Club members. And then on the right is a platter from the XJWC. JWC stands for Junior Women's Collaborative Club. And X, I have been told, indicates that members of the club no longer qualify as junior in age. So I don't know how true that is, but that's what I'm saying. So XJWC. All right. Homemaking clubs. So I'm really interested in the history of homemaking. Probably very boring to many of you, but I think it's a fascinating subject. These homemaking clubs were originally home demonstration clubs. So these type of clubs began in the early 1900s as a way to educate rural women who had not attended college, and they learned about home economics and agriculture. The clubs were part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Cooperative Extension Service. So these clubs offered instruction in all sorts of things: food preservation, nutrition, how to make nutritious meals for your family, cooking, child rearing, family health, making budgets, all kinds of different things. And these clubs also provided a social gathering outlet for rural women. So we have two different quilts here. The one on the left was from the Minnehaha Homemakers Extension Club here in Cheyenne, formed in 1927. And at the time, most of the members lived in the area of Minnehaha Park, which is now Holiday Park, I think, right? So very colorful, and the ladies, embroidered their names and the dates of their membership in the club. The one on the right is from the Chugwater Wyoming Homemakers Club, which the quilt was made in the 1930s. Again, each of the members embroidered their names for posterity, so are able to preserve that. And then here in the middle is a ribbon that was presented to a 35-year member of the Laramie County Extension Homemakers Club. So there you go. And I wanted to also say, I'm pleased to illustrate this topic with quilts. I really think that the history of quilt making also speaks to women's creativity. Quilt making is a very wonderful creative outlet. And quilting groups have provided a form of community and connection for women from the very earliest days until today. Quilting bees, I don't know if you know, began as exclusive gatherings for women around 1830, and were especially important in rural areas where people often lived really far apart from their neighbors, and this was an opportunity for them to get together and talk and, have fun. All right, now we can go on to the next one. So building upon the homemaking topic, I thought I would share at least what used to be part of a homemaker's uniform, I think you could say. Aprons are a piece of material culture that interests me again, because when I look at an apron, I think of the women that wore them. And the creativity they had to make them their own, make them different. And I also think about the household tasks that they were carrying out when they were wearing them. So, aprons had a very necessary utilitarian purpose to protect your clothes when you're cooking and cleaning and all of that. You could hold a hot pan handle when you're cooking with your apron. But as you can see, they were also very unique and beautiful and creative. And we have a lot of aprons in the collection. This is just a few samples. So the embroidered one here is from the 1930s. The lady who owned it was married in 1933. So it may have been one of the first ones she wore as a married lady. And it's beautifully embroidered in a, unique creative pattern. This apron up here is crocheted. A little bit more formal, probably used for entertaining. You'd put on your fancy apron when you had your guests over. But the maker used a variety of crochet skills. I can't crochet like that. To create a very attractive apron that showed off skills and was kind of a uniform for her role back in the day. On the bottom, these two pictures, the same apron, front and back, reversible. And it was actually made by a woman who was a home economics teacher here in Cheyenne for many years. So she might have used it to demonstrate sewing skills or cooking skills, but it was, made sense to have a reversible apron. If you spilled something on it, you could just flip it around and you'd have a fresh side. And then the child's apron on the top, made for, a child to learn housekeeping duties, cooking, crafts, all of those kinds of things. So I thought I would include that as well. All right. Girl Scouts. Anybody here a Girl Scout when they were young? Yeah, me too. I love being a Girl Scout. I love the camaraderie of being a Girl Scout. The Girl Scouts of the United States was founded in 1912 by Juliette Gordon Low. And the original mission of the organization was to help girls develop self-reliance and resourcefulness by learning a variety of skills to earn merit badges, such as, everything, first aid, horsemanship, music, cooking, camping. And skills for badges have continued to evolve until this day. You can get them in computer science, financial skills, astronomy, all sorts of things. The museum was very fortunate to receive several donations of Girl Scout items a few years ago, back in the early 2000s. Seems like that's a few years ago. And all of these collections were collected by leaders and members who had been saving these things for years, preserving them, and they transferred them to us for us to help preserve them. So we see a, Girl Scout leader hat, brownie uniform, a senior Girl Scout. This is a cook stove, homemade cook stove, Girl Scout cookie box from the 1960s, and a great cadet uniform with all of her badges.
I believe you have my Girl Scout uniform.
Yes, we do. And we have your son's Cub Scout uniforms
Yes.
as well. So, yes. All right. Skip the page. Okay, sports achievements. So women have been involved in sports as well throughout history. This lady you see here, her name was Vivian Lee, and she lived in Rawlins and won the Wyoming State Golf Championship in 1938. And that was her trophy that she won. Beautiful trophy. She won the driving contest with an average drive of 183 yards, which is pretty impressive. That's further than most women today can hit a golf ball, close to a professional level. And golf was her passion. She lived to be 103 years old. This trophy and golf ball came to us in her will after she died, and she wrote a letter about how fondly she remembered that achievement in her life. And that golf ball, you can't tell, but it says 1938 Women's Ladies Champions handwritten on the ball. So she kept it for all those years. The bowling trophy just kind of represents a team of lady bowlers. I love their dresses. We don't really know anything about the history of that other than their names, which are engraved on the plaques, which I love. Gladys, Vivian, Lila, Vi, and Maureen won that trophy. I don't even know the year, but like the rest, you can probably figure it out. Yeah, it's a pretty big trophy. Women in rodeo. We actually have a new exhibit in our museum about cowgirls. Both of these trophies that you can see here are on exhibit, so you can come back sometime and see those. This lady, Prairie Rose Henderson, was born on a ranch in 1880. And she grew up breaking horses, and she dreamed of being a professional cowgirl way back then. And she did achieve that dream. She became one of the first professional women athletes in the world by winning the Cheyenne Frontier Days Race for Women in 1899 and won a $45 saddle, which was pretty good in 1899. She won the race again in 1906 when she won this trophy here. And she went on to star in the Irwin Brothers Wild West show, which is kind of like Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, but it was locally created by the Irwin Brothers. And she was also known for her very colorful costumes with bloomers, sequins, feathers, and a broad brimmed hat. You can see she's got feathers on her costume, and very colorful lady. And then the trophy on the right, Mabel Strickland competed in professional rodeo events against men for 25 years in every single event except steer wrestling. I mean, that's pretty cool. The picture I found of her is, this is her calf roping. So she was pretty tough. And she won the McAlphin Trophy, seen there, for all around cowgirl at Cheyenne Frontier Days in 1922. She also was a very accomplished trick rider and achieved fame in Hollywood because of her skills. All right. I wanted to touch on more artistic endeavors. So this is a hot chocolate pot, teacups and saucers. They were hand painted by Kate Shaw Whitcomb, who was the wife of E.W. Whitcomb. You may have heard of him. Kate was a Native American woman from the Lakota tribe, and E.W. Whitcomb was an early Wyoming resident who first worked for Russell, Majors, and Waddell of Pony Express fame. He built several ranches, became very wealthy. They settled in Cheyenne in 1868 and lived in a very large, beautiful home on Cary Avenue. So as his wife, she had to learn some of the refined hobbies of the day. And hand painting china, you would buy blank china pieces and then hand paint them. So that became kind of popularized by the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition in 1876 as a refined hobby. So Mrs. Whitcomb was instructed by a lady named Miss Margaret Chaffin, who interestingly went on to marry Duncan Hines of Picnics fame. And she was a Cheyenne girl. I'm not sure how they met, but interesting tidbit, I thought. I thought it was interesting that this platter that came with it was never painted. So obviously people back then also had a hard time finishing their craft projects. But all of it was donated together. The wreath on the right is actually made from human hair. This was a popular Victorian tradition to make decorative wreaths out of the hair of loved ones. It falls into the category of fancy work to create a home decoration and also a commemorative item for your dead family members. And they were usually displayed in shadow boxes like this, passed down through the generations. We know this one was made in memory of Mr. and Mrs. Howard Young in 1875. So they made it by taking wire and forming it into flower shapes, and then the wire is wrapped with human hair, knotted, braided, embellished with beads and everything. We have about 3 of these in the collection, and I think they're quite fascinating. So, a few more artistic items. Needlework samplers, historically created by girls and women to improve their needlework skills. I thought I had this one for you to see. I actually have a different one, so you can appreciate them both. So obviously they often did alphabet, numbers. This one actually has the maker's name right there. Her name was Clarissa Dix, made in 1824, sorry. Very, very old sampler. The tablecloth here in the center, I just love. I think it's an amazing piece of crochet work. This is the detail of it. The lady who made that was 76 years old. She won the blue ribbon at the Niobrara County Fair in Lusk, as well as the nationwide crochet contest for ladies over age 65. And she donated both of those blue ribbons with the tablecloth. So I think that's super cool. And then I just threw in a little piece of macrame because that was such a fun craft up in the 1970s. I just thought I'd share. All right. Wrapping up, I just have a couple more slides for you. A large part of our women's history collection is clothing, as you might imagine. You know, we've got hats and shoes and underwear and, you know, mink coats and lots of clothing in the collection. But I just picked out 3 dresses to share with you tonight that represent very diverse types of clothing worn by 3 very different women who all lived in Wyoming. So the kimono seen here belonged to a lady named Masa Suimatsu. She immigrated to America in 1915 through a traditional arranged Japanese marriage to marry a Japanese man who was already in the United States. He worked for the railroad, and when they got married, they moved to Casper in 1919. They had 6 children, ran a shoe repair shop and a grocery store, and were very well-respected Casper residents. They lived in Wyoming through World War II, and their sons, I heard somebody say Tosh Suimatsu was one of their sons, and King was another son. They both, Taro, yes. They all served in the military in World War II during the war in the Japanese-American 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and very highly respected family. So that's one. The dress seen in the center, I'm sorry, it's a white buckskin dress on a white background with beadwork off the top. This belonged to Rose Nelson Ekafee, also known as Princess Bluewater. You guys are probably familiar with her. Member of the Lakota tribe, given the name Princess Bluewater as a member of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, when she toured the U.S. and Europe with her parents as a young girl. It's amazing. As an adult, she was well known in Wyoming for bringing Native Americans to perform at the Cheyenne Frontier Days Indian Village, and remained a strong advocate for and leader for her people. And then the final dress on the right is a wedding dress. It was worn by Miss Amelia Kent when she married Amos Barber in 1892. He was serving as the 2nd governor of the state of Wyoming at the time. So when they got married, she immediately became First Lady of Wyoming. So beautiful dress, though, I think. So, all right. The last artifact picture I have for you. I haven't had time to talk about beauty, the history of beauty and expectations and all of that. But these are 2 of my favorite artifacts in the collection. The one on the left is a permanent wave machine. This is the full thing. It stands about 6 feet tall. It was used from 1930 to 1940 at Viola's Beauty Shop at 507 East 18th Street in Cheyenne. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that's a while ago. So with a hot permanent wave machine like this, the customer's hair was wrapped on metal rollers attached to the clips. Electricity came through the wires to curl your hair. And the operator would apply cotton to your scalp so you didn't, set on fire or burn your scalp. It's a lot to go through for some curly hair. But the other artifact is a Rayette Dorado hair dryer chair. And it was used at the Red Carpet Beauty Salon at 819 Randall Avenue from 1967 to 1985. And I actually bought this at an auction for the museum. Nobody else bid on it. Can you believe it? That is amazing. I got it for $5. And then our final slide. So hopefully I've given you a little taste of the breadth and depth of artifacts relating to women's history in the Wyoming State Museum collection. If you want to explore our collection further, you can do so on our website, on our online collections database. This is the address for this website, and you can explore featured collections, or you can search, anything you want to search in our collections. Again, 75,000 artifacts, mostly online, and we're always looking for more donations. So if you have any leads on anything awesome, have people give me a call. I thank you for your time, and I answer any questions. Yes.
Is this the building that you keep everything in?
No. We do have some of our collection stored here, but we have a large offsite warehouse where the majority of our collection is stored. We wish we had a bigger museum so we could show off more of these amazing artifacts in our collection. We do what we can. Anything else?
How often do you rotate your exhibits?
We try to do it fairly regularly. We have a committee that meets to kind of plan. Just so you know, we are planning a big exhibit for the United States 250th anniversary. So there should be a new large exhibit on the first floor of the museum starting in July 2026. And I'm also working on a bicentennial / 1970s exhibit. So if any of you have any leads on bicentennial artifacts or stuff from, the 1960s up to the present are areas we really are trying to actively collect, because people don't often think, oh, that's not that old. Why would you want that? But we do. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.